or
Okay.
freaking.
I think we are live.
Can't you tell? Can't you tell concussion by the pupils?
This
As
was
far
not
as I'm
the most
aware,
optimal
no.
time to hit live.
Did you just hit
Nope,
live?
change that.
I sure did.
Oh yeah, no, I got a notification.
Yeah, change that. Change that. That thumbnail. We gotta change.
Oh, that's the old thumbnail. Ew, why can I hear
Yeah, it's the old
myself?
thumbnail. You heard yourself for a quick second there because I wanted to see what would happen when I turned on the notification.
I do not know how to change the thumb. Oh, there's it is.
I am trying to find us on YouTube. I am not finding it.
This just in. This cookie cracker was a bit lackluster. 5 out
We're
of 10.
going to be getting a running commentary on Camille's treat box.
We need a link
here-
to
here-
put up
here's
in
some-
our...
Here's some good ASMR for you right here. Try to guess what this is.
A crinkle.
Change.
It's a crinkle.
It's definitely crinkling.
A crinkle tinkle. Okay.
That is me unrolling a block of cheese.
Okay.
Oh.
Yum.
Oh, I'm
Great.
pretty sure we're not on live stream number 1.
Oh, you are right. Why is it saying live stream number 1?
That is correct.
Save. Okay.
Hello there, Devin. Good to see you here.
Oh, hey, Tevin.
Devin says peanut.
Welcome.
Next we
welcome
have
to
a,
the storm that is the mess of a storm that is our live
Wait, what?
stream.
Yes.
What
This
is
is
that?
a grape soda gummy. You know, now that I look at it, it kind of looks like the tip of a penis. So.
I mean, there's
I'm happy I'm not the only one who saw that.
Once you were like, "What is that?" I was like, "What is it indeed?"
it's a mystery.
I am afraid.
Why have there been so many phallic things like in our chat and everything recently? It's not even like we're trying. It just happens.
It just happens. That's just life
Everywhere
here.
I go, penises follow.
Ew.
I still am scarred from work yesterday.
That's the ladies and gents, that is the rated R version of Where Angels Go, Trouble Follows.
Oh, jeez. Chat, how does the audio levels sound? Because I think I fixed the issue from last time where there was an echo, but I could be wrong. It'll take a second for the chat to actually get there.
Mm-hmm.
Testing.
Well, testing.
Good so far, he says.
Good so
Okay.
far.
Oh,
Okay.
so while we're waiting for, oh yay, no echo, excellent, thank you. While we're waiting to really get started, I have discovered another road, or say another milestone in the experience of self-publishing.
Oh yeah.
Oh joy, go for
Let's
it.
hear it.
Well, it's getting your book into libraries.
Oh.
Yeah.
So if you want to get your book into a library as a self-published author, you definitely have to be the one to go and initiate that. But neat thing is this: you can just hop onto any library website and you can initiate the process. Like, they actually have it like just straight up there for any author to just come on and be all like, "Yeah, do you want to buy my book?" or "Hey, I want to donate my book to you." And there's a process and everything you got to go through, but it's lengthier than I thought it would be, but it's also, I think, easier than I expected it to be, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh.
Did you ever get in touch with Ron about getting your books into Barnes & Noble?
I did. I need to follow up with actually going out onto the website and exploring it.
Okay.
So he explained what the limitations are, because there has to be a buyback option. If there isn't a buyback option, there still is a way around that. But, I mean, both Barnes & Noble and Amazon want to get their money for doing this. They don't want it to go into some warehouse where they have to then pay for the storage of my book.
Oh, it's like that video I never watched about the life of a book.
Sure, yeah, I don't know.
I have
never
no idea
seen
what you're
the
talking
video.
about.
Why didn't you watch it?
It was the thing you were supposed to watch the first day when you were working at Barnes and Noble, but nobody ever watched it.
I don't remember this. Granted, my first day at Barnes and Noble was like 4 years ago.
So it's been a while.
It's a mystery to me.
And the cat just came barging on in.
Probably because
all right.
the TV they have in the break room is like horrendously old.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I like horrendously old television sets. I have an old television set from the 80s in my room.
Ooh.
And that thing is a piece of beauty.
Mr. Retro.
Does it have like
Yes.
the
and
actual like clicking knobs?
Yes, and here's the thing: half of it is in Spanish, because it was a
nice.
dual Spanish and American television set.
Well, that's Arizona for you.
Yeah. I was
My-
gonna
no,
say we
it's,
had a TV like
Spain.
that growing up.
My parents got it when they were overseas.
Okay.
I mean, it does sound like something
Oh,
in there.
so
Yeah, and I'm
that
like, you are
kind of
not throwing this
Spanish.
away. I am taking this.
Yeah, not South American Spanish. Actual Spanish.
Actual
Yeah,
Spanish.
for those
yeah.
wondering, Lars was born in Spain.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, there are many
You were?
adventures that
He's
are-
a Spanish heartthrob.
I did not know that. There's so many things I don't know about you, Lars. Every time we like sit down and talk like this, I learn something new that like completely blows my mind.
Yeah, well, you want to know something? I thought that my cousins knew me, and then this year, one of my cousins like, I didn't know that your name was David. You've only known me for over 20 years. How did you not know that my first name is David?
There's a lot of people who don't know my first name is actually William, because I just never use it.
Yeah.
Idea. I didn't know that. How do you feel about being called William?
It feels like a teacher's calling my name because that's about the only use it's ever gotten. But like it's because I'm the 5th generation William in my family, and so both my dad and I went with our middle names just so we don't get confused with everybody else. But it's funny when one of us gets in trouble and my mom starts like just yells William, and we both respond to that. So then again, I think that's partially due to the amount of anger that's present in the voice as well.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This just sounds absolutely terrifying. Let's see here. Oh, so we got some stuff here into the chat. Yes, Mary, we are so happy that you're able to actually pop in on this one. And then also Tevin says right here, watch the Amphibia video. Liked it, might add it to the watch list along with the Owl House and Infinity Train. All of those are great shows. I need to catch up with Infinity Train. I love it. And the season finale to season 2 of Amphibia premieres tomorrow.
Oh.
Sweet.
Spicy.
Oh, it's going to be so good. It's so good.
Do you know if they're going to put it on Disney Plus right away?
It should come onto Disney Plus really soon afterwards. If the Owl House is anything to go by, it should be up a month or so after the last episode airs.
Gotcha.
So Camille,
because Disney Channel wants to make Disney Channel wants to get its views before Disney Plus snatches it up.
Makes sense, greedy bastards. Okay, this is the melon taiyaki.
And how is it? On a scale from 1 to peach Kit Kats.
Oh, I don't know, because this has like it's like 2 fishy wafers. With airy chocolate in the middle. It's like I am a beauty YouTuber. You can't even see it. My camera's so shitty, but it's pretty tasty. I would say
at least you have
I
a
would
camera.
get this again. That's true.
Yeah, I probably need to get one.
No, I'm gonna get one. Shopping trip tomorrow.
Ooh. Exciting.
Probably
We
not
actually get to see
tomorrow
Lars's mug.
for me.
Really? They said they wouldn't. They said they were going to delay the Amphibia finale. That's news to me. I'm not gonna look this up. Yeah. Well, while I'm looking up Amphibia and finding out if they're going to delay it, because I'll break my heart. Shall we get started with our conversations here?
Might as well. What do we want to talk about first? Because we have
a couple different topics. Yeah.
A couple different topics.
Yeah. Tonight we've got stuff such as sci-fi. It's Weird Brother Steampunk. We also had subverting expectations and scrapping scenes. I wish I could remember who said that they wanted to have us talk about sci-fi. So if they were around, then I'd be like, "Yes, you. Let's talk about sci-fi."
Well, in the meantime,
shall we hold off on the sci-fi?
We can hold off on the sci-fi for now. I feel like scrapping scenes is something that we're all kind of familiar with enough that we can jump straight into it.
Sounds good.
Okay.
And I think really, I don't know. It depends on what we want to actually hit on first, because I think that scrapping scenes is an integral part of writing. Just in the sense of you need to learn when to actually scrap your scene. There comes to be a point in which it's this scene is not working. It's time to kill your darling, so to speak.
Right.
And so I think it's also important that you should never actually throw away your scenes, because a lot of the time scrap scenes are super integral to the story, even if the audience never gets to see it. My first 2 chapters in one of the projects I'm working on right now, Red Capes, the first 2 chapters were literally just 2 characters sitting down and talking to each other, and it was so incredibly dull. I'm like, I need to get rid of these. These are doing nothing to the actual narrative, but it helped me figure out who these characters were, which was instrumental in figuring out how to start chapter 3, and so which became chapter 1. So don't ever actually throw them out. And I think it's worth pushing through and finishing them, even if you think you're going to be tossing them.
Yeah, what I tend to do is, depending on the story, every story I have a separate doc where I put scenes that I no longer want to use, so I don't delete them. I just kind of, and I come back to it not because I'm going to put that scene back in any sense, but it kind of gives me context of why was this scene needed? What do I want to learn based off of why I needed it? You know what I mean? So I find I like what you said. I don't like deleting it because I still feel like there is merit in keeping it.
Yeah, and a lot of the times there's little nuggets that are worth keeping in your story. With those 2 chapters, I ended up adding most of those 2 chapters. There's a fly in here. I ended up actually adding most of those 2 chapters into other chapters in my story. Just I picked the little nuggets. I was like, okay, this is a good character moment. It's a good explanation of who this character is. And so I'm going to take that out and put it in a different chapter. But when it was just all of it at once, it didn't read well. And so even though the scene was scrapped, a lot of the content within that scene was still usable with my story.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I had
a
problem.
Oh, Scott, go ahead.
Yeah, I had a problem with one of my Magic Chat. Well, when I first started my magical chat group story, and it wasn't until after we talked about dull characters for the podcast that I realized, holy crap, my character for this is super duper dull. And so I ended up, I didn't feel like I could just go back and fix that. I had to, rework the character and rework the story so it would fit better. And so I went all the way back to the beginning and started rewriting it, even after I was, 25,000 words into my story. Went back and restarted it, and it's been so much better since then.
Mm-hmm.
Though I don't know if you can call that a scrap or a rewrite. I feel like I scrapped it just because the character was so dull, and you gotta like figure out the reason why it's bad, and like learn from that as you go.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, say there's sometimes though, and I'm going to come in from a slightly different angle because I agree. There's certain scenes that you end up slashing away that you can use like the bones of it later on. But like one of the things I had to come to terms with this week, and this is one of the reasons why I was like, yeah, let's talk about scrapping scenes. Was that I've been stuck on one chapter of the Dark Rebellion, and it's the same chapter, Nate, if you remember, where like I freaked out because the computer shut down on me while I was at your place. I was like, oh, come on. Oh, I've been working so long and hard at that. You know what? In retrospect, I think it's a good thing because that chapter was still bugging me. And if you're asking yourself, okay, so like when should I scrap a scene? When should I just like go at it and just start hacking it apart or just lift it and remove it altogether? Is when you're like reading through it, because when you read through your own work, like you get a good sense of like, okay, what works, what doesn't. And you read a scene and you're like, oh, this doesn't work. And so you edit it. And then it doesn't work. And so you edit it. And then it doesn't work. So you edit it. And now, like, after the 4th, 5th edit, you're just all like, it isn't coming together. And if you're just like, if it isn't coming together, it probably means that this is a scene that you have to scrap. And that can be extremely frustrating because you're like, no, I have other moments that are built up because of this scene and everything else like that. And sometimes you just have to swallow the bitter pill and realize, you're no longer taking a scalpel to your story. You're taking a hatchet to it.
Yeah.
And you're going to start hacking it to pieces. And yeah, it's hard, but you'd rather take the hard road than just be in the mire of just self-doubt and defeat and torture just to make something work that isn't working. So honestly, at that point, it's better to get rid of it. Yeah, it's frustrating. Yeah, it's hard. Yeah, it can be a little bit soul crushing, but it's better than trying to make something work that isn't working.
Mm-hmm. Sometimes I feel like it's easier to just scrap like big giant pieces, you know, kind of how like Scott said he basically like did a rewrite. Sometimes I feel like that's easier than redoing like a chapter or a scene or two, because I feel like you have to be more nitpicky. And I found with myself, there's one story where I'm writing it with someone else, and we just got to the point where we're like, we have to redo basically all of this except for one scene. And holy crap, we wrote a lot. Like, we wrote a ton. But in a weird way, like, it feels very freeing almost, because it's like, wow, we get to start from scratch, because we're completely changing like the context of it. And what started as a fanfic, we are now making an original story. And so that sounds exciting. That in a way, it's gonna be interesting. But in a way, I would rather do that for the most part than like go through a story and pick out little bits where it's like, this isn't working, I have to re-scrap it, because I like suffering, apparently.
We all do. We're writers. We like to suffer, and we like to make our characters suffer.
Yeah, maybe we make our characters suffer because we're suffering.
Probably. That's probably exactly it.
It's very cathartic.
Yeah.
Finally, somebody who can suffer with me.
Yeah.
Somebody you have to make up on the page, but yes, they will suffer with you.
Yeah.
Oh, I suffer whenever I write Gary, so I'm right there with my characters.
What do they look like?
They're little they're little melon cookies but they've got chocolate. The melon's like really subtle, and then there's like a creamy chocolate in the middle. 10 out of 10.
Melons in Japan are divine. I mean, I had melons over there that like I've never had anything like that here in America. That's by far.
They really go hard with the melon flavored things. I feel like half of the stuff in my box is like, oh, you like melons? We got melons!
Melons!
So, which I'm not complaining. I had a melon soda back in March from a box, which was hella good. So, side note, little tangent.
Art is pain, crafting or creating is pain. So is life. Lol. Art imitates life. Life is pain. I love it. I agree wholeheartedly.
This is all pain. There's actually something I want to come back to. It's one of the earlier comments from Mary talking about being difficult sometimes to figure out what makes a scene dull or what makes a scene not work. If you find yourself in a situation where you're editing and you come across a scene or a chapter that just isn't working, but you can't figure out why, that's where having a writing group is so handy, because you can give it to other people and ask what isn't working right here, and they can try to then articulate what might not work for them, and that might then reveal something that you didn't even realize, or it might help you finally put into words what you feel, but you just can't yourself put into words.
Right.
Yeah.
So I mean that's my best suggestion, because I mean what makes a scene not work changes from scene to scene to scene. There's no universal rule of, hey, this is how you make it better.
Yeah. And that's the one thing about just writing advice in general, is that it's nothing more than just advice. Like it's just, there's no set way to do something, and so it just takes tinkering and seeing what feels great. And even then, nothing's ever going to be perfect, and so, just do something that's good enough. Best advice I can give, just be mediocre, it's fine.
Oh, no.
Mediocrity is fantastic.
Mediocrity.
That's strangely
doing
wholesome.
It. No.
I think it's also important to consider, like, why... Sorry, I disassociated for a second there, and I lost my train of thought. I think it's important to also remember...
experience.
Yeah, no, these cookies are doing it for me. Holy crap! I'm sorry, I'm having a stroke. Like, why is it hard to rewrite certain things? Like when you're faced with the task of scrapping, or like, why is it so hard to kill our darlings? I think that is important to consider as well, because I feel like when we come to terms with those things, it opens us up to better, accept what needs to be changed or what needs to be thrown out altogether.
Yeah.
Oh man, killing your darlings. Yeah, let's see here. Say Scott's talked about having to like change up things with Magic Chat, and there's been, what is it now? There have been 3 books that I've completely tossed the first draft. Just like, yeah, no. This is awful. Whoop, there it goes.
Universal.
Yeah, I think the most.
I wish too. Yeah.
The most. Oh, I wish. The most painful instance of that was for Monarch Mercenaries, because that was 3 months of pain to create the first draft. And there's like, nope. Toss it all. I mean, I kept some of the bones. I kept the main characters. I kept the idea of where they were going, because it's a story of different heists. And so I kept all of the different heists. I kept all the different robberies, but I did them completely differently than than I had before.
Yeah.
Very bare bones.
I had to toss out like the first 8 or 9 chapters of Black Wings, which is my main story, just because it was not good. I mean, it was very early writing. It was the first thing I wrote, and so first 8 chapters were completely rewritten for my next draft, which I still actually need to finish doing. But yeah.
I like this in the chat. It's hard to let go of attachment, and I feel like that's a big reason for me. Is like you spend so much time writing these characters that you really grow attached to them, or you get attached to like certain scenes you've written or certain dialogue where you're like, this is so good. I want to get rid of it, but sometimes you have to for the greater good, and I feel like that's a really big one.
Do it for the vine.
It's hard to do that.
I said do it for the vine.
Do it for the vine.
Yeah.
Wow, that was a throwback.
That was a throwback. It's not even Thursday.
Oh, throwbacks.
On Mary's point, talking about prologues, I think one thing... Oh, let's see what Scott says. Prologues are hard to do. Yeah, I agree, Scott. Prologues are kind of interesting because a lot of readers don't read prologues. And
and it's usually always better just to jump straight into your story. The only prologue I've ever seen that I enjoyed was more of a... It was the one they have in the Belgariad, the ones they have in the Belgariad that are... They're basically like the myths and legends of that world. And so it's like kind of cool to see like something the characters will talk about or have talked about in that kind of sense. But it's like it's set outside of the story in a way that it's like not like getting in the way of the plot in any way.
Right.
Yeah. The one thing I've always tried to...
like...
Go ahead, Camille.
Oh, I was just going to say, sometimes I feel like prologues are very, like, they're important to the story, but they're so out of context that it's like, I just read 5 pages of this scene that I'm not going to see these characters ever again. Yeah, so it's like, you really don't... That's, yeah.
Yeah, and that's the one thing I've always tried to do.
I mean, here's the thing.
Is that, like, I've always tried to do something different with them. And so, for example, with Black Wings, the prologue is a letter that the king has written to the main character. And so it's like, you don't really know what's going on, but you don't really need context for it at the same time. And so it works really well in that instance. And so I think prologues are just something that you gotta think outside the box for.
Yeah, you see, and I'm going to come from it from a completely different angle. I love prologues. If there's a prologue in a book, like, I'm just like, yes, thank you. There are very few prologues I've come across that I didn't enjoy. Like even a prologue as bizarre as the beginning to the Wheel of Time, which is just like you have no context for anything that happens, and it's a guy creates a volcano murdering everyone. As he goes insane. And yet that prologue is so important to things that come later on. Also, The Way of Kings has 2 prologues, which is legit a prologue to the prologue. And Brandon Sanderson's like, I shouldn't have done this. I'm like, are you kidding me? I love this, but I guess I'm just a weirdo. And I only have, let's see here. I only have 2 stories that I've written that so far that don't have a prologue. Sandwich Desperados and Monarch Mercenaries. Those 2 don't have prologues, but all the rest of my stories do.
Yeah, I really don't mind having prologues. As a reader, I like them, but as a writer, I also feel like, is this necessary? You know?
Yeah.
And sometimes I feel like they can kind of be a crutch to your writing, like. I've only written 1 prologue, I believe, and it was for my very first story. And And now that I look back, I'm like, it's so unnecessary. Like, it gives context to something that you learn about later, but through context, you know, now you no longer need it. Yeah. And at that time, like, it felt like I needed a prologue to, like, oh, I gotta set the mood, set the scene. But then it's like, these characters were alive like 1400 years before the main story. So it's like, I feel like sometimes they can be a crutch in terms of like grabbing the reader's attention.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I feel like they can be problematic because they can take away from the main story.
Yeah. And I think there's also, along those same lines, I pointed at my microphone, not at Camille. Along those same lines, my biggest complaint with Renegades by Marissa Meyer, it's one of my all-time favorite books, highly recommend it, but one of my biggest complaints is that the first chapter of the book is really just a prologue, and it reads like a prologue, it feels like a prologue, and it's not a great way to start a book. Like, if it had said prologue, and then, you know, you read it, then you're like, okay, I see. But it tried to sell it as a first chapter, and then when the actual first chapter, being the second chapter, comes out, it's a completely different tone shift because of it. And so then it's just like, wow, I could have skipped the first chapter, you know what I mean? But if it's a prologue, you kind of expect that kind of a thing to, you know, you expect that. And so it's also a bit of a game in setting expectations as well.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
Yeah.
Wow. I love this. I love how we went from scrapping scenes to prologues.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Just natural progression through the topics.
Really, though.
A topic we didn't even plan on talking about.
And that's half the fun.
Yeah.
Oh, that's all thanks to Mary.
All right.
Yeah. That's because Mary's
Mary.
Awesome. Thank you, Mary. Oh, and welcome, Kylie.
Oh,
all right. So, shall we hop into sci-fi?
Might as well.
Yeah. I think there's quite a lot we could talk about with this one.
There's a lot.
I feel like I don't know what to say about this one.
There's so much we don't know where
to start.
Really?
Because, Camille, I thought that you've actually written some sci-fi.
Yeah, I have. I do have a sci-fi story. So, but I'm also like, what are we talking about?
Yeah.
I feel like
there is a lot.
It's just fantasy with technology. The end.
Future fantasy.
Yeah, just future fantasy.
Well, and see, that's actually one of the things that that I found, like, as I was looking up to see, like, okay, what have other science fiction writers what have they said about, like, the do's and don'ts of sci-fi, and they're all like, it's not fantasy, and it's really fantasy writers that say no, it is fantasy.
Yeah.
The one big thing I came across when it comes to sci-fi is that whether your sci-fi story has more mystical elements or if it does just base itself in technology, the things that you really want to focus on are matters such as, like, what does it mean to be human? Because the idea being that technology is advanced to such a point that it will have changed society. And so it's like, okay, like, you live in a world with AI, or you've discovered aliens, or you live on a planet other than Earth. What does that mean? Because honestly, our identity is so tied to Earth the way it is and the kind of society that we have right now. So you get to explore what people would be like in a very different setting. Something like, for instance, a good example would actually be the Minority Report. It takes place on Earth, but it asks the question, what if technology could predetermine murder? Like, if it knew when someone's about to murder and you could stop murder from happening, what kind of a world would you have? And you have a world that has less death, yes, but you find out that then it leads to people becoming complacent, and they're not ready for when someone actually does commit a murder. They have no idea what to do anymore, and it just starts going crazy and wonky.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it's that kind of thought you put into, like, what's going to happen in the future. It's kind of the ultimate, like, if-then statement in a story form, and you just follow that natural progression as far as you're able to do. And that's what makes kind of one of the earlier sci-fi stories, the H.G. Wells' The Time Machine. So much fun because you actually get to see that progression of like, if this happens, then that, and then if this happens from there, then that happens, kind of idea, and you just get to see it as it continues to go forward.
Let's see here. Yeah, H.G. Wells. Yeah, H.G. Wells would be one of the pioneers of what science fiction. Actually, an intro like this. Sorry, this is like a little side tangent right here, but it's interesting that in the late 18th century, so late, yeah, wait, no, not 18th century, 19th century. I'm getting my numbers right. It's been a long day. So in the late 1800s, the late 19th century, there was actually a push for more sci-fi stories.
Yeah.
However, at the time, they were not considered to be science fiction. Instead, they were considered adventure. And even still to this day, you have the adventure genre, which is almost like a dead genre now. There's very few books that actually go into the adventure genre anymore, which is weird because the adventure genre is so broad. It's meant to encapsulate stuff like Indiana Jones, Time Machine, Journey to the Center of the Earth, 10,000 Leagues Under the Sea, all of which are essentially science fiction stories.
Yeah.
But they're not considered as such. So that's just an interesting little side tangent right there.
But you're also kind of pointing out a few of the like 1800s authors that were like pioneering kind of that sci-fi role, with like H.G. Wells. You've got Jules Verne, Edgar Rice Burroughs. I'm sure there's others, and those are only like
wouldn't be until
right?
Yeah.
What?
Asimov
what's his
was
bucket?
until
The guy.
like the 50s.
Okay, that's what I thought.
Yeah.
Later, but. And now we got Mary Robin who is a phenomenal sci-fi author, and I will praise her. I will sing her praise from the rooftops.
There's a lot of great sci-fi authors out right now.
I'm happy to see that other people are beginning to recognize her as well. I just recently came across an article about why she needs to be seen more and read more often.
Yeah, she's incredible.
But as far as but coming back to the idea of sci-fi, because I mean I'm primarily a fantasy writer. The most sci-fi that I have is Monarch Mercenaries, and that's because it's set in space. And I mean it's not a traditional spacefaring story, and I think that that's totally fine. When it comes to science fiction, just the same as with fantasy, you have you have a lot of room that you can work within. You can do a whole lot of different things, and even Star Trek, which like people are like hold up as like the absolute epitome of like what sci-fi is. Even Star Trek got into the mystical. Like if you look at the the Q race, the Q are essentially mystical beings. Like they just say that they're science, but when you go to like quantum mechanics, even within the realms of science as it is today, is essentially magic.
Yeah.
Like
so
which Bunny Girl Senpai. Quantum mechanics makes a bunny girl.
So we will have to answer Kylie's question on the chat. Namely, when we want to make a futuristic world, what do we do to make it seem believable? And I think we're going to get to that.
Yeah. And
as well.
I think this is actually a good point because this is something that I've been working on. My sci-fi story within my main series is from the same world as like this medieval fantasy world. Well, it's in the same world as all these medieval fantasy stories, but it just takes place in a future in which it's science fiction-esque. So it's like a mix between science fiction and fantasy. And so there's a lot of fantastical elements in it, but it's supposed to read more of like a sci-fi. And so how would you go about writing a more believable sci-fi world in a world that's also a fantasy world?
As far as like for instance, building worlds, like let's say like let's say you want to, for instance, you want to go to like another world. Like let's say you're going to do space sci-fi, and you want to go to other worlds that are believable. I personally believe that it's okay to err on the side of awesome. So, like for instance, the Voltron Legendary Defender series, for all of its flaws in its second half, one of the things I love about that series is its fantastic different worlds. Like, there's like one planet that's like that has like these weird spikes coming out of it that like rise up like 10 times the size of Mount Everest. Actually, well beyond that. And the thing is that by the rules of science, a planet like that can't exist because as planets form, they become like a sphere. If it can't fit into that sphere shape, the laws of gravity rip whatever wants to like stick out. But it's okay. Like you can say, yeah, there is this crazy world that looks different. What you then have to then account for is like, okay, you can then say, yeah, this crazy world exists, which then means that like the laws of gravity are warped. And so like when your characters go to this planet, it can be totally habitable, but then like don't go to that mountain because if you do, you get like sucked into space because gravity is strange. Something like that. And so just so long as like you acknowledge, yeah, this is a weird world, give it some fun little rules that apply just to that planet, and it's just you have to play it like it just is.
Yeah.
If you yourself as the author try to scrutinize every little thing that you put into your story, your book becomes tedious and people start poking holes into your own logic. If you just treat it as, yeah, this planet's got weird gravity, hence its crazy mountains. Okay, moving on. Don't go to those mountains.
Yeah.
Then you just have a chapter where someone goes to that mountain, gets sucked into space. Then everyone's like, oh no, they got sucked into space, rather than like, well, actually, that wouldn't happen.
Actually.
Yeah. I think it's very...
I feel like...
Go ahead.
I was gonna say, I feel like sci-fi in comparison to fantasy has a lot more room for the suspension of belief. Because of instances like that, because it's like we don't know, we don't know what things will be like futuristic wise, and how many movies or stories have we seen things sci-fi or futuristic where it's like Back to the Future 2 with the hoverboards, like that stuff is so cool. I feel like the suspension of belief, like no one is questioning that it was 2015 and we have like hoverboards. Yeah, I feel like when you are just confident and just kind of go with it, I feel like confidence is key, and kind of like how you mentioned, Lars, just kind of saying like this is what it is and there's quirky aspects about it. People are most likely going to be like, yeah, that planet sounds sick. Like, and I'm actually I have two sci-fi stories. But one of them is like a sci-fi in another genre that I can't say because it's a huge spoiler. But the main one that I'm working on, like, there are a lot of different planets. It's in a different galaxy than Earth is, even though humans are there. But every planet has like something very quirky about it, for lack of a better word. So like there's one planet where the sun like is always shining, and so they have to have like these giant I don't know how to explain it, but like basically like giant solar panel things that protect the people that live on this planet, otherwise they'll just like burn to death type of thing. And so it's just kind of one of those things where like the inhabitants are like, this is our life, and so just a bunch of different things like that. I feel like that's the fun thing about sci-fi, is that you get to push the envelope of what we know and what we accept as fact and science, and you get to have fun with that.
Yeah. I feel like really the main way to actually make it feel believable is how your characters interact with the world, how your characters interact with the technology or the science that you're exploring within your story, whether that's like realistic sci-fi or outlandish sci-fi. Like, it's all about how do your characters interact with it, how does that affect this narrative that is being propagated by your characters interacting with this world.
Yeah. Yeah, because it would be very different writing a story where you have a character who is like new to this type of world and they're constantly asking questions like, how does this work? How does that work? Yeah. Then I feel like that's a little more difficult to work with as opposed to a character that like that is their world, you know?
I mean, think about it. How often do you sit down and like say, how does a TV work? Well, you see, there's a bunch of little itty bitty little liquid crystal displays that, you know, nobody does that. And so when you're writing a story from the point of view of a character within this world, they're not going to sit there and say, how does a TV work? Oh, this is how they work, and write it all out. That's not, they're not going to do that.
Give me a step by step.
Yeah, they're just going to be like, oh, here's a TV and it's showing a soccer game.
Yeah.
You know?
Explain it to me like I'm 5.
Yeah. And so I think it's very easy to get lost in the weeds of sci-fi. And I feel like that is where most people's downfall is. Whereas sometimes less is more, especially when it comes to like technology within stories.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah. And here's something I want to say as far as like especially like if you want to start getting like really creative with your sci-fi. Because this just pops into my head from reading this book, Platinum Magic. One of the most aggravating things about Platinum Magic was that it wanted to be like fantasy sci-fi, and it leaned too far into the fantasy aspect rather than embracing sci-fi. Like you can blend magic and technology together and it works, but this person went too far magic. It was just like, yeah. So they're going, like, how do they get around? Well, they have these flying cars. Sweet. What do they look like? Oh, they're just massive sleds that fly through the air. And I'm like, Santa flies with a sled through the air with his magic reindeer. You can't convince me that elves and dwarves who are working in the SWAT team are flying on a sled without reindeer to an orc house to stop domestic abuse, because that just looks too silly in my mind. Like
on
if they have a
platform, like going
if they
like there's no like armored sides or a roof for protection or anything. That's
there was none of that. There was none of that. It's like, okay, if you're going to do sci-fi, if you're going to do sci-fi, you kind of have to lean into it a little bit and think, how would people actually do this? If you've got the SWAT team is armored. Their cars are armored. They are armored. When they come in, SWAT Santa. SWAT Santa. They're like a freaking battering ram.
I love SWAT Santa. We need that on a shirt. Yes.
SWAT Santa.
SWAT Santa. What are you dressed up as for Halloween? I'm SWAT Santa.
I'm putting that on our list.
Yes. I might just do that. I might just do that for this Halloween.
Put on a t-shirt.
On
Pass
shirts.
Me the blue nipple juice.
Yep, that's one of them. Wine, trees, and women. What more do you want?
Oh no.
Oh no.
Oh my gosh! I might just do SWAT Santa this Halloween, because I've been going as a Mistborn for like the past 5 Halloweens. I need to shake things up.
Yeah.
You do.
I was gonna go as Link last Halloween, but then I got COVID and I couldn't go out, so I just had to sit at home and dream.
I walked around a neighborhood that was really nicely decorated on Halloween, and I was just like, it's so depressing because I'm the only one out here.
Yeah, I feel like Halloween was not even a thing last year. What was the point?
What was last year?
Last
year didn't exist.
What was last year? And it was perfect. It was cold. There was a full moon. It was so good.
The perfect Halloween, and we all missed it.
Exactly. I mean, the decorations were impeccable, but it was depressing. There was no trick-or-treaters out. Moving on from SWAT Santa, I love how we're keeping in theme right here with the S tier. SWAT Santa is definitely S tier. Steampunk. Steampunk is the weird, awkward brother of sci-fi.
Yeah. I feel like
I
a
love
lot of the
steampunk.
same. Yeah. I feel like a lot of the same, like, concepts apply in steampunk though, where it's like it's all about how the characters interact with the world, and that's the main part of it. If your focus is on the technology, then you're missing the point, I feel like.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. I'm also writing a steampunk story. Basically, I have a project that hits nearly every genre. It's very lofty, but I feel like if I had to compare the two, my steampunk and my sci-fi stories are very similar in that we went the route where, you know, there's different technology, and in our steampunk one, it has a lot to do with the plot. And it kind of came down to our world, our rules, baby, and you just roll with it.
Mm-hmm.
It's like sci-fi, but make it brassy.
Make it shiny.
Like,
make it shiny.
Nice
make it shiny.
Steamy.
Shiny! Say for my steampunk story, Bleed, Steam, and Steel, one of the things I really enjoyed doing with that was coming up with the technology for the paladins. These hulking mech suits that are steam powered, and like there's actually some really great like anime short, like some animation shorts out on YouTube, and also some other work that's been done of these steam powered suits, but they're always like super bulky and everything. I'm like, no, I want mine to like be more sleek, have more finesse to them. And so I designed these things, and yeah, once again, your rules, your world. But I didn't want because then otherwise there was a part of me like in the back of my head was like these steam powered suits are almost too close to shard plate from the Stormlight Archive.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, I don't want to look like I'm just doing steampunk shard plate right here. So like I made them bigger, and I made it where like, yeah, you can use them with finesse. Like you can even like using your own fingers, you can bend the fingers of these behemoths. So that way you could like, in theory, you could like use utensils with these massive suits. But the thing is that when the machine is cool, as it's getting going, you have to put way more muscle into it. And so any paladin driver, anyone who goes into these suits, has to be ripped. And they have to they have to make sure that they don't hurt themselves when they're in these suits, especially once the suits get going. Because as you build up momentum, it gets harder and harder to stop. And so like that was a fun thing to put in there. Yes, it is still it's still very fantastical, but putting in consequences for these characters makes it then where like the technology just isn't a solve all, but you're like, oh, if they actually use it, oh, you know that things are going down, and like you're kind of on pins and needles. Like, okay, I know it's going to get really cool, but there's so many things that could go wrong for the heroes here, which is why like Asuka being in the suit is just so freaking awesome because she's such a badass. But like even then, still things don't always go well for her when she's in the suit.
Yeah.
Which also for anyone who,
finish your thought, then we have a question.
Oh, I was just going to say, for anyone who caught that, they're like, wait, Asuka in a giant suit? I have to admit, I did not watch Neon Genesis Evangelion until after I wrote the steampunk story. And I was like, oh, dang. Well, I'm not changing her name.
Regardless. Lars,
I'm not changing her name. Asuka works.
When can we find Bleed, Steam, and Steel?
I'm going to publish it this year. That's the plan.
Yeah, brother.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm going to shoot for an October release.
Lars has written so far, so it's a good one.
2 questions here. We have, what about SciFi and Magic systems? The only work that I have seen that utilizes them to the fullest was Star Wars.
That's something that I want to... Yeah, that's something that I want to tackle within my story because there's going to be magic and sci-fi.
Mm-hmm.
But
that's a good question.
Yeah. It is something that you kind of have to dance the line of.
I feel like people are afraid to tackle it.
Mm-hmm. The way that I kind of envision it is just like with anything, like as technology advances, it's more so like technology is all just a byproduct of trying to make life more livable. And so when it comes to magic, that's something that would play into it as well. And that's something that in my story, that's the reason why magic is so like obscure, is because it doesn't really help life at all in most instances. And so really the only people who know how to use magic are fighters, people who actually like go out and try to learn it so that they can become better fighters. But yeah, it's an excellent thing to kind of stew on.
Say I want to for a story that actually blends sci-fi and magic really well. This is a video game, but Destiny, and yeah, I understand Destiny's got a lot of faults in its gameplay, but its story has some pretty incredible things where, I mean, the characters they really lean into the fact that like, yeah, as a player you die multiple times and get brought back to life. So they're like, yeah, your character gets brought back to life. How? Magic. And so like so these characters are then capable of doing these incredible feats because of magic, and they can make these really insane guns that shouldn't be able to work, except that they use magic in the forging process to keep everything together. Otherwise it doesn't work. But magic can't solve all the problems. So you need technology, for instance, to like figure out how to pack more ammo, build better armor, actually travel from planet to planet, because the magic that allows them to like do really crazy reality defying things has been sealed away because the god that gave them that power is like on the verge of death. So because of that, they only have limited access to magic. And like it's really neat. So like because the magic then can't be a fix all, but there's enough of it to create these incredible moments throughout the game that then is enhanced by their use of technology.
That's a good example.
Yeah. I was going to say RWBY first few seasons, not a terrible example, just in the sense of like, you know, they have technology, but then the magic of their semblances kind of helps accelerate their abilities. I guess that's the best way to say that. But I mean, I guess the rest of RWBY also has that exact same thing, but I don't like anything after season 5. So I'm not going to talk about it. It's a sore subject.
Here's another question.
I'm the last person to go through that.
Yeah. Kylie asked, when thinking of weapons or things like machines, serums, transportation, etc., how do you incorporate those so that they fit your world without also confusing your reader? An excellent question.
Very good.
Yeah. I think this is another lesson more.
I feel like it follows the same rule as like fantasy exposition.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And it comes back a lot to like what Nate said. It comes down to your characters, how they react in this world. So like a good example. So I'm going to take an example from one of my stories, where you have in the sci-fi setting, you have a variety of different weapons. When I wrote the first draft, the one that I chalked, it went into great detail about how these weapons worked. It was boring. It's like, congratulations, you just took a really cool weapon and you made it stupid. So instead, the character's just all like, okay, I only have 2 guns for this fight. A gun that throws lightning bolts, and then like another gun that just like is essentially a massive hand cannon. And he's like, I only have 6 shots in each one. I gotta make them count. And so then the character is like trying to figure out how he can use lightning to like not hurt the other people around him, which is kind of crazy because it's lightning. But it's just like if the character has to accept that this is just the way that it is. And like for instance, something like medicine, like, oh my gosh, like so and so is dying from like this alien cancer, and then when they take him over to the hospital, they then explain this alien cancer. They can have the doctor say, ooh, yeah, that's really bad, but don't you worry, we have this experimental drug right here. And then it just like you just play into it. You don't have to stop and then say like, oh, it was made using these specific compounds, yada yada yada.
Yeah. I think with all of these though, you kind of have to take the same rules you have to when you're like creating a magic system. You have to like have the rules for whatever that item is, like, very specific and well put together. You don't have to tell your readers, but you have to understand them yourself, because there's like, okay, this gun does this one specific thing. It can't do anything else. Mm-hmm. You have to keep yourself to that. So you've got a spaceship. Oh, it can go faster than light speed. That's great. It does its job, but it's not going to be able to, like, do all of this other crazy stuff, even though you want it to. It needs to have one specific purpose and do that purpose. If it does it well, that's awesome. But you need to keep it just to that rule you've already set.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And here's another thing, because we're actually talking like really like high crazy sci-fi fantasy right here. Like, let's say you actually want to like dumb it down a little bit and keep it kind of a little bit more grounded in the realms of reality. Right here, honestly, what you just need to do is you just need to take some time and like do a little bit of research. You've got time to do some research, figure out what people have already been discovering about certain fantastical things. I guarantee that most stuff that you might have cooked up, some crazy nutjob scientist has tried it before and has published an article on what they have found. Like, I'm thinking, for instance, of like Ender's Game. The idea of spinning the hull of the ship to try to create artificial gravity. And there are scientists who have worked on that and have said, yeah, it's possible to do that. Only you have to make the ship massively huge if you want that to work. So stuff like that. Or also, like, one time I wanted to figure out what would happen if two planets got super close to each other. And like the laws of science dictate that planets can't get close to each other. They repel each other. But once again, like, it's your story, your rules. And so like you could say, for instance, like, let's say you want to create a space anomaly. Why are those planets so close to each other? Shouldn't they like have repelled each other? One should be flying into the sun, the other should be flying out of the system. And then you could be like, yeah, I wonder what's doing that. And then you could then impose your own little, like, that's where the fiction comes in, where you then create an element or an anomaly that, as Scott said, it operates according to certain rules. And the characters may or may not ever figure out those rules. But like, if you want your story to come across as more realistic, do some research. And I guarantee you can find a whole bunch of stuff with just some simple Google searches. You can find some great articles that have been published by scientists, and they're not dry at all. Scientists want people to read their crazy, kooky ideas and discoveries, so they actually try to make them interesting.
Yeah, and I think especially if you're talking about technology, a lot of technology, especially the technology we use every day, like phones or computers, they're all very simple, but it's like the individual parts of a computer, it's very simple. It's just somebody figured out a way to take all of these simple things and link them together into a complex network that makes a computer. And like, computers, in case you didn't know this, are super dumb. They only know two things, on and off. But like, somebody figured out, hey, if we take on and off, we can make this, we can, create a program, and then we can do this and we can do that. And so it's like, the actual basis for technology is simple, but it's then in the way that those simple ideas are executed is where you get the complexity. And so that's just something to kind of keep in mind if you're, in your sci-fi stories working with technology or something like that, is that oftentimes it's very straightforward, very simple, and it's just how it all interacts together.
We should have had Kip as
hopefully
our
that answers.
thumbnail for Napoleon Dynamite.
I love technology.
Put in the crystals.
Yeah.
I love that part where they're putting in the... He's like, okay, put in the crystals. And then you get zapped in the balls.
Well, let's see. Did we want to touch on any of the subverting expectations? Because we're getting kind of close on time.
Yeah. Subverting expectations. So I threw this out there as a topic for us to go over because it was an idea that I kind of wanted to dive into with another video, but I just knew it's like, yeah, there's no way I'm going to get to this because there's so many other things I want to do. But subverting expectations, I have come to find, is a highly misunderstood term. And because it's highly misunderstood, a lot of writers have essentially taken it to, I can do whatever I want with my story and just say, oh, I'm subverting your expectations. You thought the characters would get together. Psych, they don't. Oh, you thought that person was the villain, but really this person, who I can't even justify as the villain, was the villain all along. Huzzah! That's not subverting expectations. That is what that is what gentlemen and scholars call an ass pull.
What?
That's your $1 million word for the day. Go forth and spread the good word.
Go forth and spread the good word. That's not subverting expectations. Subverting expectations is pretty much the same as a plot twist, except that in this case, rather than like twisting around the plot where it's like, oh, really, it was about this the whole time. Instead, what you do is you're setting up a scenario or you're setting up an outcome that you then shift. However, that shift does not betray the characters or the world building that you have already established.
Yeah.
It's something that the audience didn't expect, but it makes sense.
Yeah, another one of my complaints with the Renegade series by Marissa Meyer is the fact that the very end of the book, there's like this plot twist or this like reversal of expectations, and the entire time you realize that it was just a lie. It was just a lie that the characters were propagating, and it's not satisfying. You know, if it were like, especially on a second read through, like you read through it, you're like, this is a lie, like, and you can see it because you know what's going to happen. And so the entire time that they're talking about this specific thing, I won't say anything because I don't want to spoil it, but the entire time they're talking about this, and you're just like, they're lying. Like, she should know better. Like, why is she saying this if she knows it's not the truth?
I remember you talking about this. Was it kind of the instance of like an unreliable narrator? Was that?
Well, I think that's kind of, I think that's what she was going for, but instead of being an unreliable narrator, it just felt like a lying narrator. That's what it felt like. Because it's like...
You kind of missed the mark.
Yeah, just like a... Whoa. My floor like vibrated.
Something...
Yeah, that was, I think my dad must be doing something downstairs. Anyway, but like the entire...
Earthquake in Prescott.
Yeah, maybe. It would be a small little town, weird place to get an earthquake, but, you know, stranger things have happened. But it's like just a simple change in like verbiage for this particular lie would have fixed it. Like just a single word is all it needed for it to be an actual like subversion of expectations. But no, instead it's like, oh, I'm just going to lie to the readers instead. It's like, please don't.
Whack.
Yeah. But I also feel like another side is that a lot of people think that like, oh, well, if I subvert your expectations, like if you're expecting one thing and I give you something else, then that's going to make the story better. And that's not always the case. And so be careful because, you know, sometimes being like, what's the word I'm looking for? Predictable is a good thing. It doesn't mean it has to be bad. Like, being predictable isn't a bad thing. Don't be afraid of it.
What is an example of a story with bad subverted expectations?
Other than The Last Jedi?
Yeah,
that's the
sure.
low-hanging fruit.
Okay. I'll give you another one that has a bad subversion of expectations. Is Ghostbusters 2016.
I never watched
and
it.
I'll give you the scene. Oh, it's a bad movie. I nearly walked. I have never walked out of a movie before, but that was the one movie where I was actually getting up out of my seat to leave. And there was one scene that brought me back. I was like, okay, that made me chuckle. And then I was like, why did I bother sitting through the rest of this? But in any case, there's one scene that's a subversion of expectations, and it was, or quote unquote, a subversion of expectations, and it was awful. It's a scene where Bill Murray gets killed by a ghost.
Oh, spoiler
and
alert.
It's, yes, it doesn't matter. No one should ever watch this movie.
It's not canon.
But what? Yeah, it's not canon at all. There's a scene where the Ghostbusters are trying to prove their credibility by showing a ghost to a skeptic. And so Bill Murray, who's the skeptic, shows up and he's like, "Show me the ghost." The ghost comes out. He's like, "Oh my gosh, ghosts are real." And then the ghost hurls him out the window and he dies.
Wait, is he not supposed to be the character that he was in the original Ghostbuster movies?
No, it's all of the original
like
Ghostbusters who are still alive were just cameos.
Oh, okay.
And you can tell that Bill Murray was phoning it in. He did not want to be on set. Yeah. The entire for the 2 scenes he was in, he was hating it. He was like, "I'm getting paid $1 million to show up, and that's why I'm here." But the thing is that it was such a disappointing scene because then the characters continue to go uncredited. It doesn't do, and like nothing happened. Okay, so the guy died. Like, well, and then they're like, "See, ghosts are real," but it doesn't matter. That entire scene didn't matter for anything. It was just like, "Oh, you didn't expect the critic to get killed," and it's like, "Oh, that was stupid. That was stupid." And if if you wanted to kill him, like, you could have then made it where it's like now they're blamed for his murder, and so they have to prove once again that ghosts are real, and then that's like what leads to like ghosts getting like unleashed because the people who are doing the investigating to the murder mess around with the tech and then boom, release all the ghosts that they've captured. That would make sense, and that would actually be really interesting. But they didn't. They played it up for a gag and then went along their merry way. It made no sense. It was a betrayal of everything they'd set up. It was just stupid.
Good example. I think so. We can compare Ghostbusters 2016 to a movie like I mentioned before, Megamind, which I think subverts expectations extremely well. An underrated gem.
That is.
So, Camille, how does it subvert expectations well?
Well, I feel like you brought up when I mentioned this movie, and you brought up the point where it's like at the end. I can't remember what his name is. What's the name of the hero that Brad Pitt plays?
Metro Man.
Metro Man. Yeah, like at the end.
Call him Brad Pitt.
Yeah.
Call him Brad. Yeah. So
Jed is here. Jed has joined.
Hello,
Jed. Never doubt the Jed.
His message has been redacted.
Never doubt the Jed.
Jed.
Of course, Jed's message has been redacted.
Oh, Jed just came in to say that he agreed. I've been blessed with the agreement of Mother Jed. No, I feel like
chat.
one scene that's really good of subverting expectations is at the end when you think, "Oh, Metro Man's back," and it actually isn't. It's Titan, and then you have this whole thing where Megamind like he has like his coming to Jesus type of thing. Yes, Titan is a creepily awesome villain. Yeah. Now I just feel like I gotta watch that movie again this weekend. But I feel like that's a really good example of subverting expectations because it's like, I just really like how they went about Megamind's change from villain to hero because it wasn't completely linear. He went about it in like such a roundabout way, but everything ties in together so well that even with like the idea of Metro Man, when they like go and see him and he's like, "No, I'm done," like they set it up so well to where you would expect with this big scene, it's like, oh, he did come back, but it's not actually him. Like 10 out of 10, chef's kiss. That movie's so good.
Well, I think the entire kind of plot of that movie is a subversion in its own right. because it like messes with the whole like, oh, the like hero and the villain roles and who has to play what and like what kind of characters they have to be. And so you have Metro Man, who's supposed to be Superman, supposed to be saving everybody, and at the start of the movie he is, but then later on in the movie, no, he doesn't want to do that. He wants to be Music Man or whatever, and he doesn't want the responsibility that his powers gave him. While the villain, he's the guy that's supposed to like be destroying everything, and it's like he just wants attention, he just wants love, and going about trying to destroy everything, that's how he figured it out. But like when he starts actually getting love, like, and it's a believable progression, it's a believable story in that regard. And just like the entire movie is a subversion on just like the superhero genre in the first place.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a good subversion on that genre.
And I know I've said this before, but there's more to subverting a genre than just like flipping
a trope or something.
Yeah, flipping the trope. Because if you just simply flip the trope, you still have the same trope, and you still have the same flaws and problems with that trope. It's just in reverse. And so you have to, you know, still give it its proper due.
Yeah. And I'll say since we've got since we've gotten here, Avatar: The Last Airbender. Avatar: The Last Airbender also has some subverting of expectation moments.
Yeah.
In it. And like for instance, I think a great moment, like this is not one that like people would readily recognize as like I've subverted your expectations. Rather, like they just say it's a really great reveal. But when Zuko saves Aang from I can't remember the name of the first general who goes hunting after him. Yeah, exactly, him in the first season. He shows up as the Blue Demon and fights his way in, saves Aang. It's a great moment. And then when it's revealed that Zuko's the Blue Demon, you're like, wait, what? But it makes sense because Zuko, he needs to capture Aang himself, and so he's going to make sure that no one else can get their hands on Aang. Zuko is very intelligent. He's highly skilled, and of course, he's not going to murder his own fellow Fire Nation people. It all makes sense when you go back and you look at it, but in the moment, it's such a great shocker. It's one of my favorite episodes of the entire series.
Yeah, and it's kind of your first like look at more of just Zuko's character, because at that point, you know, it's been just I must regain my honor, I must do this, I must get the Avatar. You know, it's like you get the first glimpse of him like being more than just that, you know.
Yeah.
Okay, here's a question to kind of start to wind things down. Kylie asked, so were I writing a story through the point of view of a character with questionable morals to the point where people think he is a villain, but after hints reveal who the real villain is that more plot, twist, or subverting expectations?
Huh. Look at this again.
That's an excellent question.
Yeah.
You know, I would say, let's see here. And
I think you should have a caveat on this, that we're aware of who the real villain is and like some of what they've done even up to this point. We don't want to surprise villain in this kind of situation. At least that's what I would recommend.
Right.
Because you're like, oh, like this person's really not the villain. It's this person that I just pulled out of thin air. It feels kind of cheap when you do something like that.
Ooh, excellent. Right. Excellent example. Sky High.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
where the class
right
president
there
is really the villain. Yeah, I know that. Oh my gosh, I'm just full of these. But you've got the class president who ends up being the villain, and the bully is actually, like, he's not the greatest guy, but you find out that he's not a villain. He's just not a good guy yet.
Such a crush on him when I was a kid. Anyway, somebody say
yeah. I think that it worked, like, right there. It works because you're not shying away from the fact that this person has questionable morals or is rough around the edges or does things that honestly it's hard to agree with, or maybe even they're just straight up a bully, but that doesn't immediately vilify them. I think that's something that a lot of people have forgotten. There's a big difference between an antagonist and a villain. An antagonist is someone who challenges either the protagonist or the reader. A villain is someone who is actively trying to do awful things to other people for whatever reason.
Right, but I think in this instance in particular, based on the question, we're looking at this from the perspective of the villain, where it's like it would be like, I'm trying to think of a good example. It would be like Harry Potter through the eyes of Voldemort or Umbridge or something, where it's like,
I couldn't stand Umbridge.
Yeah, where it's like it's the whole story is through their point of view, but there's actually, they have their own antagonist type of thing. Like, I feel like depending on how you go about it, I would probably say it's more of like a plot twist. Because if you have it where it's like the whole story is built around, this, you have this one idea of how the story is in your head, but then at the very end you have one thing that like makes you. Here's an example: Shutter Island, which is such a good movie.
I love that movie.
Such a good movie. I feel like that is a good example that is kind of closely aligned with this, where like, I wouldn't say that movie subverts expectations, but it has one hell of a plot twist, where you then question, like, is this person good or bad?
Yeah.
I've seen the movie like 3 times and I still don't know. So I think, to answer Kylie's question, I would probably put that more in the realm of plot twist than subverting expectations, because I feel like subverting expectations is more of like certain elements in a story that are kind of built around tropes or cliches, as opposed to a plot twist is kind of like one thing in a story that like changes or alters how you see the story throughout, that has like a build up to it.
Yeah, I feel like subverting expectations is more so something on like promises you've made to the reader and kind of like subverting those promises, whereas a plot twist is, like you said, more so like how it changes the context of the story. I think subverting expectations and plot twists are kind of just like a zucchini and a cucumber. Like, they're both vegetables. They're both very similar, but they have different tastes, and so you can kind of mix them in a sense of like, you can mistake one for the other, but at the end of the day, they're both vegetables, and they both have their place on the in a salad.
Cucumber was a fruit.
Technically, zucchini is also a fruit.
That's true. If we're getting into the technicalities.
Squash is a fruit. Corn is a fruit. Oh my
gosh. Everything's a fruit.
And we're all fruits.
Lettuce is not a fruit.
The fruit of the womb.
Lettuce is alive.
Because it comes down to seeds, right? Mm-hmm. Something to do with seeds.
Yeah, if it has seed. Yeah. Well, not so much if it has seeds. If it's the actual plant itself, it's a vegetable. But if it's like the fruiting thing, so a lot of the times it has seeds, but it doesn't necessarily have to have seeds.
So a carrot is a vegetable.
Yes, because it's part of the root.
A carrot's a root.
Yeah.
So it would be a vegetable.
So, but a tomato is a fruit.
Tomato's a fruit.
And a potato is a potato.
Potato's a potato. It doesn't need
a patat.
A patat.
I'm glad we had this confusing
Corn is a grain.
discussion. Corn is a grain?
Oh,
to
please,
Jed.
let's not get
Jed,
biblical
get
here.
out of here.
The mother Jed has spoken.
Never doubt
the
the Jed.
Well, I think
That was a good place to end it.
Yeah. I hope you enjoyed our vegetable podcast. It was fun.
Yes. I'm more confused than when we started.
That's to be expected.
So what constitutes a smoothie?
What constitutes as a smoothie?
I mean,
Yes.
technically speaking, isn't tomato soup just a warm smoothie?
Well, then you're going into the realm of what constitutes a soup.
Oh.
That's a fair point.
I don't want to think about my soups as smoothies.
But
That
they
ruins
are.
that ruins the allure of a smoothie.
I mean, you can have vegetables in a smoothie. They do it all the time.
It's really all very arbitrary, isn't
Yeah.
it, though?
Yeah, everything
If
is
it
arbitrary.
fits in a blender.
If it fits in a blender.
I mean,
You heard it here first.
Yeah. You know what? Okay. Here's a writing prompt for everyone right here. Write a scene like this, because honestly, like, it's so much fun having a scene where you've got people like us talking about like what is actually like a fruit.
That's
having
honestly like
I think what-
crisis.
that's a majority of my stories is just dumb characters being dumb together, and it's the best part about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, like it's what makes characters super relatable and what makes the dialogue fun. I think one of the most fun dialogue moments I've ever written was for a fanfic with Bill Cipher trying to argue why pineapple pizza is the best pizza.
because it is. Yeah. There's no argument
Period.
there.
Because it is.
It's not.
Because it is, but everyone else in the world views that as unholy chaos, which just fits well with Bill Cipher, and so it's like.
I feel like even people who like sweet and savory things are still people that argue that pineapple doesn't belong on pizza when it's the epitome of, it's the paragon of like perfect sweet and savory married together in a symphony of deliciousness.
Yeah, people don't like pineapple on
Yes.
pizza because the internet told them they shouldn't like pineapple on pizza, and it's
People
a
don't
crying
like
shame.
pineapple on pizza because they like being wrong, apparently.
Exactly.
Or they're from the East Coast and they think that their thin pizzas are the absolute best. Thin pizza is delicious, but it ain't the only pizza.
I will die by cast iron pizza. I love. Okay.
Give me pineapple
Well,
or
I
give
should-
me death.
Yeah. Exactly.
Die.
Die by pizza. That's my preferred way to go.
Yes, please.
Well, this has been fun. Thank you, everybody, for joining. We'll be back at it next week.
Yes.
Later.
Oh yeah. Actually, before wait. Before we sign off, if you have topics that you would like us to discuss in these live chats, then please put them into the comments, or you head on over either to our subreddit or you can use also one of our links to get onto our Discord and bring up stuff that you would like us to talk about.
Yeah. Do it in the comments. Do it on the Discord.
On a pizza? No.
Granola and ghost peppers. Now that's a party right there.
Disgusting.
Fiber and flames.
That'll
Oh
wreck
no!
It's
Oh,
like the Dragon Force song
combination.
through the fiber and flames.
Oh.
Ah!
All right.
And on
Goodbye,
that note,
everyone.
Camille, you want to take us home? Give us.
Yes. Goodbye.
Yeah.
Goodbye, mother.
Good night.
Okay, let's see. I need